In this video, we will talk with care and respect about 5 signs that may indicate that an elderly person is in their last year of life. This is not about predicting the future or causing fear, but rather offering understanding. Because when we recognize these signs, we are able to care with more presence, more empathy, and more love. Breathing is one of the most automatic and essential processes in the human body. It accompanies us from birth to our last breath. Therefore, any change in breathing patterns can be a strong indication that something is different, that something is changing. In older adults, especially those with chronic health problems or in palliative care, it is common to observe changes in the way they breathe. But when these changes become frequent or occur even when the person is at rest, it is important to pay attention. These changes may include irregular breathing, with long pauses between breaths. Sometimes breathing may become shallow, as if the air is no longer flowing naturally. In other cases, there are episodes of rapid breathing, almost like running without moving. This pattern is known in medicine as Cheney-Stokes breathing and is characterized by cycles of deep breathing, followed by pauses and then rapid breathing. Although common in people with heart failure, this breathing can also be one of the signs that the body is preparing for the final stages of life. In addition, some elderly people begin to make different breathing noises, such as a wheezing sound or more intense snoring, even while awake. This often happens because the throat muscles begin to lose strength, and coordination between the breathing and swallowing muscles decreases. For family members and caregivers, these moments can be distressing. Seeing someone we love breathing with difficulty can cause fear, helplessness, and even despair. But this is precisely when attentive and loving care makes all the difference. Being present, holding the person's hand, keeping the environment calm and quiet, with soft lighting and silence around them, can alleviate some of the discomfort. Simple techniques, such as slightly raising the head of the bed using a humidifier or administering medications recommended by a healthcare professional, can help. It is important not to interpret these changes as suffering with no way out, but as a sign from the body that it is entering a new phase. With love, presence, and respect, we can make this phase less painful and more dignified. If you are interested in topics such as elder care, aging, and end-of-life care with dignity, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. And if this content helps you in any way, please leave a like. Moving on, the second sign that deserves our attention is extreme fatigue, a deep tiredness that seems to have no end. We have all felt tired at some point, whether after a day of work or a bad night's sleep. But the fatigue that occurs in terminally ill elderly people goes beyond simple tiredness. It is as if every movement, every gesture requires a huge effort. Walking to the kitchen can become an impossible task. Getting out of bed can feel like climbing a mountain. This exhaustion does not come alone. It is often accompanied by a lack of appetite, disinterest in things that once brought pleasure, and long periods of sleep during the day. It is as if the body is gradually shutting down, prioritizing only the most basic functions to keep the person alive. Behind this fatigue are profound changes. The metabolism slows down, internal organs begin to work less intensely, and even the muscular system begins to slowly disintegrate. That is why, even after hours of rest, the person continues to feel weak, without the strength to interact. For caregivers, it is important to understand that this type of fatigue cannot be resolved with a good night's sleep or a reinforced diet. The approach must be different, more focused on comfort, acceptance, and understanding that the body is telling us it needs to stop, and stopping is not failing. Stopping, in this context, is part of the natural process of life. The elderly person is not being lazy or giving up. They are simply following the flow of what their body needs. Emotional support, gentle touch, quiet conversation, and constant presence are more effective here than any medication. Offering water, adjusting the pillow, respecting the person's time are all actions that make all the difference. Often people feel ashamed because they can no longer do things on their own. Saying "It's okay, Hux, you're here" can alleviate this feeling and create a more humane and light-hearted environment. The human body is an extraordinary machine, built with systems that work together, almost invisibly, to keep us alive and healthy. One of these systems is the immune system, our line of defense against invaders such as viruses, bacteria, and fungi. During youth and part of adulthood, this system responds strongly, reacting quickly to threats, but over time, it wears down. And in older adults, especially those in a more advanced stage of frailty, this wear and tear becomes evident. That's when the third sign begins to appear: frequent infection. In the last years of life, it is common for the elderly to develop infections more easily and more regularly. Sometimes these are mild infections, such as recurrent flu or colds that take a long time to go away. Other times, they are more serious infections, such as pneumonia, urinary tract infections, skin infections, or even sepsis, which require frequent hospitalizations. These infections are more than just isolated episodes. They are a reflection of a defense system that is no longer able to cope with external aggressions, not even the bacteria that naturally inhabit our bodies and which, under normal conditions, would not cause any harm. In the case of the elderly, especially those with reduced mobility or who spend a lot of time in bed, these infections become a constant cycle. They are treated with antibiotics, improve slightly, but soon return. often with greater force. A classic sign of this is recurrent urinary tract infections. In many elderly women, for example, this type of infection occurs several times over a few months, sometimes without fever, but with symptoms such as mental confusion, agitation, drowsiness, or a sudden decline in general health. In men, the infection may be related to the prostate or the use of catheters. These infections, even when treated, often return because the body is no longer able to stay strong enough. Another example is recurrent pneumonia. For an elderly person, a simple flu can turn into pneumonia in a matter of days. This occurs not only because of lung fragility, but also because the breathing muscles are no longer as efficient, the cough reflex is weakened, and the accumulation of secretions becomes dangerous. With each episode, the body loses a little more energy to recover. In addition, there is another important factor. Many elderly people, because their immune systems are in decline, no longer show the classic symptoms of infection. They do not have a fever or report pain. Sometimes the only sign is different behavior, sudden confusion, unexplained discouragement, or even a fall. Therefore, it is essential that caregivers be alert to these subtle changes. What appears to be just a bad day may actually be the onset of a new infection. The impact of these infections goes beyond the physical. Each new hospitalization, each new cycle of antibiotics represents an emotional blow, both for the elderly person and their family members. There is fear, doubt, and frustration at seeing a person's health gradually deteriorate. Often, doctors themselves realize that treatment is no longer producing the same results as before. The body is less resistant and recovery times are longer. This may indicate that the body is reaching the limit of its ability to fight. This is when the approach to care needs to change. Instead of insisting on cures that may no longer come, the focus can and should shift to comfort, dignity, symptom relief, and the person's emotional well-being. This does not mean giving up, but rather respecting the limits of life and accompanying this phase with love and presence. And it is precisely when these infections begin to accumulate, further weakening the already fragile body, that another sign begins to emerge. A sign that does not manifest itself in the physical body, but in the mind. It can arise subtly or present itself suddenly, taking everyone by surprise. This is what we will discuss next. At some point in the journey with an elderly person, especially when they are already in a more fragile phase, changes arise that are not physical but mental. And it is these changes that we will talk about now. Among the most delicate signs of the possible end of life is cognitive confusion, a change in a person's mental state that can affect memory, orientation in time and space, language, perception of reality, and even recognition of close people. This type of confusion can arise gradually or suddenly. Sometimes the elderly person begins by forgetting small things, what they had for lunch, where they put their glasses, what day of the week it is. Other times, the change is more dramatic. They wake up not knowing where they are, say things that are disconnected, or show fear and disorientation for no apparent reason. These cognitive changes do not always mean dementia, although Alzheimer's and other types of neurodegenerative decline are known causes. However, in the context of someone already facing chronic illness, severe limitations, and significant functional loss, this type of confusion may be directly related to the body's natural shutdown process. There is a term in medicine called terminal delirium, which describes this state of acute confusion in people who are in their last days or weeks of life. But this process can begin earlier and with more subtle nuances. The elderly person begins to disconnect from reality, has difficulty maintaining a logical conversation, and seems to be living in another time or place. This type of confusion is not only frustrating for those observing from the outside, it is often distressing for those going through it. There are moments of fear and despair when the person feels that something is wrong but cannot explain it. At other times, they may seem calm but distant, as if they are gradually withdrawing from the world around them. Family members faced with this often wonder if they are losing their loved one before they even say their final goodbyes. The father who was once lucid now calls out the name of someone who died decades ago. The grandmother who always recognized all her grandchildren now confuses them with childhood neighbors. These experiences can be painful, but they also carry a deep emotional charge because they reveal behind the confusion memories and affections that remain alive, even if in a distorted form. It is important to remember that in many cases, cognitive confusion is also associated with physical factors. Dehydration, infections, metabolic imbalances, and even medication can worsen or trigger this state. But when the body can no longer recover effectively, the state of confusion tends to become persistent. Instead of trying to force the person to come back to reality, the most important thing at this point is to provide a safe, welcoming, and calm environment. Speaking softly, using touch as a form of connection, and respecting silences all help to alleviate anxiety and create a more serene atmosphere. Sometimes, just being there, present, is what matters most. It is interesting to note that even in the face of confusion, many older adults still seem to connect with emotions. They react to music, a familiar voice, or the smell of something familiar. This shows that even though the mind is drifting away, the heart still responds. And when this disconnection from mental reality is combined with the physical signs already mentioned, such as constant infections, extreme fatigue, and respiratory changes, it shows us that the body and mind are walking together down the path of closure. But the body still has more to say. There is a sign that, although subtle, is visually noticeable and often most evident to those who live closely with the person. It can appear gradually or suddenly, and usually carries a clear message that the body is at its limits. It is this sign that we will discuss next. There is something silent and progressive that happens in the bodies of many elderly people as life begins to draw to a close. Weight loss. We are not talking here about a cosmetic change, weight loss by choice or dietary control. We are talking about significant involuntary weight loss that often escapes control even with proper nutritional care. This sign can appear subtly. First, clothes start to feel looser. Then the face changes, losing its vitality and natural fat. Over time, the arms and legs appear thinner, and the body as a whole seems more fragile, as if it were slowly emptying itself. In most cases, this weight loss is not directly linked to diet itself, but to a profound metabolic decline. The body simply begins to process nutrients more slowly, more inefficient. Muscles begin to break down even if the person is eating. This is what we call cachexia, a syndrome common in advanced diseases that represents a progressive deterioration of body mass. There is also a natural loss of appetite. Taste changes, the desire to eat disappears, and even chewing and swallowing become tiring tasks. Food, which was once a source of pleasure, now seems more like an obstacle than a comfort. In some cases, the body itself rejects food with nausea, discomfort, or even total refusal to eat. For family members and caregivers, this is one of the most difficult signs to deal with. It is common to hear phrases such as, "If she eats, she will get better," or "He just needs to eat better to get back to his old self." And yes, eating is important, but there are times when the body no longer wants to accumulate energy, but only to remain comfortable. The urge to feed comes from love, from hope, but it is essential to understand that forcing food when the body is no longer accepting it can cause more suffering than relief. The focus needs to shift. Offer foods that bring pleasure, respect the wishes of the elderly person, and ensure comfort above all else. Significant weight loss at the end of life is not a failure. It is part of a natural process. The body is dignifiedly shutting down its most basic functions. And this shutdown does not have to be lonely or silent. It can be accompanied by presence, care, and affection. Throughout this series, we have discussed 5 signs that, although subtle, may indicate that an older person is living their last year of life. Changes in breathing, extreme fatigue, recurrent infections, cognitive confusion, and significant weight loss are not just medical symptoms. They are messages from the body, warnings that something is changing profoundly. Recognizing these signs does not mean losing hope. On the contrary, it is a way of offering true presence, mindful care, and love at the right time. It is a chance to exchange urgency for listening, expectation for compassion, treatment for connection. Often, we focus so much on avoiding the end that we fail to be present in the now. But the truth is that the end of life can also be lived to the fullest. When we understand that being with those we love, even in silence, even without answers, is already an act of immense love.